we go on to Mr. Ryan Karanjawala. He's managing partner of Karanjawala and Company, one of India's leading litigation law firms. Sir, if I may ask you to please share your opinion on this topic of media and law.
So, Tarun, when I was looking at the topic, when I got it, media and the law, I chose to make a small twist, and I've chosen to sort of deal with one specific aspect of it, which is the courts and the media. How have the courts and the media interacted over the years? And then I'll deal with one of the problems that Parag suggested and take further the solution that Mukul gave. So, if I were to look at things in a chronological way, when Mukul and I both left Government Law College, he in 1978, I in 1979, to come back to Delhi and join the bar here. Mukul joined the High Court. I joined Praveen Parekh, and therefore was practicing predominantly in the Supreme Court. Both the bar and the bench were very, very different creatures from what they are today. Just to give you an example, the Supreme Court had only four courtrooms right there in the beginning. Secondly, the council's fee, much to the horror of everyone else here, was a fixed fee. It was something that Motilal Settlement had laid down many years ago, 2 decades ago, as what a senior counsel's fee in the Supreme Court should be. So it was 1,140 for an admission. It was 1,650 for a final hearing. Those days at 10:15, 10:20, when we walked across to the corridor of the Supreme Court and looked down at the car park, there were 8 or 9 cars. This just gives you the sheer contrast of where things were then and where things are now. But the biggest contrast is if you were to pick a newspaper of those days and if you were to pick a newspaper of today. In those days, you could read a newspaper for 10 to 15 days at a stretch and find there would be no mention of the courts at all. In fact, I think many newspapers never had something called a legal correspondent. All these are things that have evolved over the years. And of course, newspapers led to TV, which in turn led to many, many channels. And today, therefore, you find the courts being reported about in almost every TV channel. It took foresight on Kartikeya's part to decide well in advance, way before the other channels did, that perhaps the time has come when a TV network must have a legal show of its own. And I must compliment both Kartikeya and you, Tarun, for the kind of legal show that you people have been able to produce. Legally speaking, has been able to achieve what many corporate clients of mine have always wanted to do. There have been so many corporate matters in which my firm has briefed the eminent counsel of their time. So there's a Singhvi, there's a Sybil, there's a Mukul, there is a uh, Salve, and everyone has always come and said, "Yeah, can't we just have a joint conference? Can't you get them all into one room and let's have a conference with all of them together?" And we always said, "No, no, boss, we can't achieve that because they're all, too difficult to handle, too difficult to handle." Tarun, you and Kartik have been managed to time and again, week after week, get all these councils in one place, giving their views on the topic of the day. So I must congratulate you both. And this endeavor that we are here today to inaugurate is a further step in that direction. But of course, one of the things that has happened as a result of this sudden spate of litigative news is the problems that the media has had in the way in which the media has reported some of the cases. Now, there has been always, and in recent times, the courts have been very concerned with what they call a trial by media, which is something that Mukul also mentioned. In Arushu Talwar's case, it was my firm which was which was on record. Mukul was the senior counsel, and everything that he has said is absolutely correct. It ruined those people's lives. It made their acquittal far more difficult, though ultimately the High Court acquitted them. There was another case of Sanjeev Nandas, which is that R.K. Anand case where we came on record way after R.K. Anand was removed. That was another case of trial by media. The other cases Parag mentioned was the case of Sahara. Again, trial by media, sensationalizing, things like that. So the question that has to be asked is, in today's context, when you face this problem, what is the solution? And the solution is something along the lines which Mukul suggested. Why is there a trial by media? Why is there this sudden desire to break news? Because you want the first TRP, you want the greatest revenues, you want to sensationalize because you realize then sensationalizing is what gives you the eyeballs, which gives you the TRPs, which gives you the revenue. Now, the time has come to put a stop to that. And the only way one can do it, according to me, is if a body is constituted which has the power. Don't give them the power to sentence people to jail. Don't have that penalty imposed. Don't give them the power to cancel anyone's license. Just give that body a power to oversee how a media has reported a particular case and penalize them heavily. Follow the money, as they said in Watergate. They have done this in order to get their TRP ratings. If ultimately you are able to establish that what they did was wrong, if you're able to establish that their conduct was contumacious, if you're able to establish that they deliberately misbehaved only in order to get an unfair advantage, then go ahead and penalize them heavily. So that then everybody, every journalist, when he steps into before the camera, realizes that he doesn't want to say something which will ultimately affect financially the people he works for. Every newspaper, every channel owner, every newspaper owner, everybody will be extra careful when they deal with it, and there will automatically be a more careful way of reporting cases in court. So, to sum up, the media is completely free in the sense there's no penal proviso by way of jail sentence, etc. But nevertheless, it's like damages in defamation, except that this is by an authority. There is no interpersonal distinction. You somebody puts a complaint before the authority, maybe a retired Supreme Court judge or a panel of judges or whoever the authority is constituted, goes into the matter, takes holds an inquiry, says no, this particular conduct was contumacious. All right, we impose a fine of 3 crores. 2, 3 fines of such dimension, and automatically you will find over a period of time the enthusiasm of the reckless reporter suddenly subsiding. You will find the enthusiasm of the reckless newspaper owner suddenly subsiding. And I think that is one of the ways to deal with the problem at hand. Thank you.
So now this is happening to me always. Thank you so much, Mr. Karanjawala, for giving a historic view as well as the current view. In fact, we are in a sense also happy because Justice Arjun Kumar Sikri and Justice Keher, who was the Chief Justice of India, both are heading different bodies, which are in a sense to look to regulation of media, not regulation, but at least oversee the content. And if there is any complaint, they and of course, the National Broadcasting Standards Authority is again headed by a retired Supreme Court Judge, Justice Sikri, and they have been penalizing channels. And Mr. Rodgi had a point to make.
Just before the learned judge speaks, this example of irresponsible journalism, I have got a message from Lokmat. Lokmat is a well-known Marathi paper in Nagpur, saying that the Prime Minister is going to order a lockdown tonight. I have got this message from Lokmat, forwarded from Lokmat and by many other people. Lokmat is now saying they have deleted the post. Now, if this message goes across the nation, which it will, what kind of problems going to create for people who are struggling to make their daily bread morning and evening? Somebody start running from here to there. This is the problem. And sir, this is what is required to be addressed. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you so much for this input that you shared. Now, the moment has come that we all get to hear Honorable Mr. Justice Surya Kant. Just to give a bit of a background, sir has been the Chief Justice of the Himachal Pradesh High Court. He was also the Advocate General of the state of Haryana and has been in the bench for 21 years now. I think this is the 21st year running that sir is part of the bench. Now, of course, he's judge of the Supreme Court of India. Sir, now we await for your speech and your comments on the topic of media and law. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarun. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity to me to share my views on this very quite interesting and very relevant subject of law media. And I would slightly expand it to say that law, media, and society.
Yeah, yes.
Well, the doyens of the Supreme Court bar has spoken before me, and all of them are broadly of the same view and quite unanimous that media nowadays needs some kind of regulation. Whether Mr. Tankha saying that media is not having an absolute right to freedom, or Mr. Tripathi also saying that there is no express freedom provided to the media, except that I will later on quote the constitutional debate and what Dr. Ambedkar had said about it. Dr. Singhvi's very serious apprehension of not freedom of press, rather freedom from press, and what Mr. Mukul Rohatgi has given very shocking examples in the past, which have really left an impact on the society at large, that how sometimes media can play such a reckless role. Mr. Rohatgi and Mr. Pranjwala both have
Sir,
suggested.
just 1 minute. I'm so sorry. Mr. Rothgi's mic is on, so we can hear double audio. So if we
Yes, I was just pointing out that Mr. Rothgi and Mr. Pranjwala have very rightly probably suggested that some kind of regulation, which of course Dr. Singhvi suggested self-regulation, and so was by the other uh, legal jurists suggested, need to be addressed and need to be introduced to have a kind of control, whether it is self-control or whether it is a regulated control over whatever the excesses the media is perceived to have committed or is committing day to day. In this context, well, I must confess that there is a little left for me to speak on the subject, but I must start with a very often quoted quote, which was, of course, in a different context, when we said that we are drowning in information but starved for knowledge. I feel that this quote very aptly applies to the state of media today. Any discussion surrounding the launch of a journalistic website, as you are today introducing this digital website, would therefore undoubtedly transgress into a debate on freedom of expression and obviously the role of media in a democratic republic. We all have acknowledged that media holds immense power to mold public opinion, perceptions, and beliefs. Hence, therefore, it owes a very responsible duty to acquire information from verified sources and then only express the views to empower people, provide them with unbiased and truthful information, and guide them to make informed choices. It is therefore essential to trace out the evolution of journalism, the impact of its shortcomings on the justice system, and also to explore the role of websites like the one you are launching today towards bridging such kind of gaps. We know it that the modes and reach of human communication have been constantly expanding since the invent of the printing press. The long journey of the journalism has culminated into a medium of mass communication at much lesser a price than even the paper they are printing on. Throughout their history, newspapers have sculpted the political environment of the day and have played a leading role in revolutions and freedom struggles. I am giving an example of even pre-constitution era when the country was, in fact, the country had at that time started the freedom struggle. Please remember Lokmanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak, whom Gandhiji called the master of modern India, and the British colonials, of course, attributed him the tag of the father of the Indian unrest. He had published two newspapers. One was Kesari in vernacular, the other was Maratha in English. And the thought provoking articles he used to write were really played a very vital role in achieving the and getting the moment of the freedom struggle. The rest, as they say, is history known to all of us. The media, I believe, through its investigative journalism, hold those in power to account, and journalism definitely in the past has helped protect democracy and freedom throughout the world. The media today wields enormous power, as not only does it report information, but also creates an aware citizenry and sets the tone of the public discourse. I therefore strongly believe, like my other previous speakers, that the democratic values will indeed be compromised without a free press, and therefore media has been rightly theorized as the fourth estate in a nation governed by the rule of law. Dr. Singhvi also highlighted about the exalted status of the fourth estate given to the media in this background. The technology has evolved tremendously, thereby reshaping every sphere of human life, be it be the means of communication or the rest. Today, mobile data is affordable, and social media users are immersed so deeply that their capability to influence or sweep the human communication is beyond doubt. In many countries, especially now in COVID times, digital news and media have already vaporized the print media. The past decade has seen the emergence of many brilliant news websites, online periodicals, and analytical blogs. What we call, and Mr. Mukul Rohgi, in fact, gave an example also. The Facebook, the Twitter, the WhatsApp, the Signal, all have emerged as the primary means of connecting with the outside world. Even the annals of the Indian courts have been redefined by the online reporting sites, as Prague was pointing out, which their columns and live commentary have opened up courtrooms and brought judicial proceedings to every willing citizen's fingertip. He rightly pointed out that what has been argued, what has been interrupted, what is being reported, what is being observed, everything is nowadays available on the online sites. Legal journalists, Mr. Kranjwala pointed out how the invent of the legal correspondence, which was there unheard at the time when I would say their old gold days and good times. But now legal journalists and court reporters are also perceived to have bridged the gap between the media and the judiciary. Columns and shows like the one hosted by Tarun help by raising legal awareness, reporting judgments, making law more accessible, and directly facilitating the principle of good governance. The debatable issue at the same time is that the organized media is largely left unregulated. And that is the concern I think all legal luminaries have shown today. And this is happening in most of the democracies, presumably to prevent institutional capture and influence from the other interconnected limbs of the government. But as rightly pointed out earlier, like most other things, there are both positive and alarming negatives to such lack of regulation. The media across democracies needs more self-regulated reforms to live up to its ideals. This is what I personally feel. It's the media has the propensity for superficiality, and its tendency to create sensation is no secret. The financial interests have transformed their once virtuous goals into a business venture where profit is becoming the sole motive. Dr. Singhvi highlighted this aspect quite well, and I must say very frankly and without any hesitation, he spoke on this issue. And I'm also sharing this view that this kind of attitude of media leads to desperate, sensational, unverified, and false reporting. Reeling constantly under pressure to be the first to break news and attract eyeballs has crowded out the space for in-depth discussions on serious public issues and has transformed the daily 8 p.m. news into flashy infotainment. These problems have only been compounded since the advent of the internet, which has removed barriers of publication and increased seamless access. Many times, the media is known to provoke hysteria, which affects not only the trial of an accused in the courtroom, but also his life outside, even if he eventually earns acquittal. I think every learned speaker has shown his concern about this aspect of the media's, should we say, the modern day excesses, that how the running commentaries and the pre-judge trials are conducted and the persons are being, and some living examples have been quoted by Mr. Rothgi and the other learned speakers. The media also make it difficult for the consuls to act without fear of social repercussions, and it impairs the anonymity of the witnesses. The victims of false reporting who suffer irreparable damage to their social status and reputation therefore start accusing some of the media persons as blackmailers paradise. Let us remember, and I really wish to quote that the Constituent Assembly itself was very aware of these formidable threats. During the discussion around the draft Article 13, Damodar Seth and KT Shah proposed to incorporate separate and express freedoms for the press. However, after much debate, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the chairman of the drafting committee, forcefully argued that the existing protection extended to citizens would effectively also cover journalists and that there was no need for any further protection for the journalists. We must remind ourselves that over the past 7 decades, since the Constitution was adopted, both the legislature and the judiciary have expanded the freedom of speech with a view to enable greater transparency and by giving newspapers the right to circulate or the right to advertise or giving investigative journalists the right to information or the right to report court and legislative proceedings. But we've also acknowledged that journalistic freedoms are many times unwittingly endangering the fair trial and rights of human citizens, normal, ordinary, common men. Oral observations of a court, this was pointed out by Mr. Tripathi also and by other speakers also. Oral observations of a court during the course of hearing are made highlights and flash news, and that too totally out of context. Such oral observations may not have any impact on the final verdict, yet the media celebrates preemptory pronouncements and declares these observations as the court decision. The Law Commission also expressed its concern about it, and it explored in depth the interface between judiciary and the media and took a dim view of media trials. It noted that the law should not allow unrestricted freedom of publication, granting full immunity even if journalists interfere with the criminal justice in matters pending before a court. The press council, Dr. Singh was quite critical, and so was Mr. Rothgi and Mr. Kranjwala, because they feel that the existing institutional modicum is not sufficient to regulate the press. But I just pointing out the press council has also laid down certain norms of journalistic conduct which advise media persons against conducting parallel trials, foretelling decisions, or putting undue pressure on parties or judges. Media is free to report pending judicial proceedings in a fair, accurate, and reasonable manner and not publish anything which may obstruct, impede, or prejudice the due administration of justice. But as rightly pointed out, the recent instances, 2-3 examples Mr. Rothgi in fact gave, make it very clear that there is a problem of adherence and implementation, with many anchors engaging in theatrics which ill behoves their public role and professional code of conduct. It's time that media in India be more measured, responsible, ethical, and it emerges as a robust institution. We all know that there is an increasing disillusionment of people with the quality of overall governance, which can only be fixed by giving them a voice and discussing their grievances on public forums. There is urgent need for the media to concentrate on the plight of the common man and uphold its role as the esteemed fourth estate of our democracy. This requires a reorientation of approach away from profit and TRPs only. But there is nothing to feel, I always feel that there is nothing to be always disappointed, and there is always a ray of hope. And I feel that the websites like the Legally Speaking, the digital site which you are launching today, will emerge as a great ray of hope for everyone. Not only do they introduce a saner voice in the chaotic landscape of reporting, but they also make academic literature on the law more accessible. There is a pressing need for lawyers and jurists to publish legal content written simply on publicly accessible platforms. Such cross-pollination between lawyers and journalists would bring a new analytical thinking to media and raise the level of public discourse in our country. We all are confident that the Legally Speaking website, run by an outstanding legal brain of Mr. Kartikeya Sharma and Mr. Tarun Nangia, will surely provide that desired platform and fill up the vacuum. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, sir, so that profound commentary and analysis, and very reassuring words when you said more self-regulation, which means there's still scope for us to become better. I can assure you that we are going to make all those efforts in the coming days. And I would like to thank all of you so much. I would like to thank you, sir, then Mr. Mukul Rohotgi, Mr. Vivek Tankha, Dr. Abhishek Singhvi, Mr. Parag Tripathi, Mr. Ryan Karanjawala, for sparing your time and joining us for today's occasion. I'm sure the takeaways will have learnings for so many lakhs of people who want to watch this. And the take homes are going to be something that will be mulled upon and discussed for times to come. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll hope to see all of you again soon on some such occasion. But clearly, I'm indebted to each one of you, and especially Honorable Mr. Justice Suryakant for making time. Thank you so much. Thank you.